This is a safe space. Questions you ask will not be shared or attributed to you. We can never guarantee privacy on a Zoom call. So if you have a super private or sensitive question, please consider sharing that with us privately. For closed captioning, for anyone who needs it, if you hit the 3 dots that say more at the bottom of your Zoom screen and hit captions, then hit show captions, that will pop up. If you need help finding that, feel free to let us know in the chat. If you have a tech issue at all tonight, please message Carolyn Jones, who is running our slideshow, letting folks into the meeting tonight and helping with tech support as able. If you are a reporter, please identify yourself in the chat now. Know that the first 20 minutes of this conversation is on the record, but the information shared in the chat and during the Q&A is off the record. If you need to follow up, you can reach out to Emma, who's available at emma@southern-equality.org. And I think with that, that is all of the information I have logistics-wise before we get into things. I will pass it off to my fellow presenters this evening to do a brief introduction and tell a little bit about who you are and what brings you to this meeting tonight.
Hi, yeah, I can introduce myself. My name's Emma Chin. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with the Campaign for Southern Equality. We're an organization that works to ensure LGBTQ Southerners are equal in every part of life. We haven't historically done work in Oklahoma, but we're really excited to be launching the Southern Trans Youth Emergency Project in Oklahoma, which I'll talk more about later. We're based in Asheville, North Carolina, but I'm calling in from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm from Tennessee as well.
I'm Carolyn Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I am also with the Campaign for Southern Equality and so happy to be here with y'all. And I will say a song that's giving me strength. Sorry to hop past that for you, Emma, but I've been listening to a lot of Muna recently, and I'd recommend that you all also listen to a lot of Muna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Megan Lambert. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the legal director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Oklahoma. And we are a local affiliate of a national organization that engages in organizing, legislative advocacy, and litigation to advance and protect civil rights of Oklahomans. And what brought me here today is not only to get some community with all of you, but also because I am one of the attorneys challenging both Senate Bill 613 and last year's special session, Senate Bill 3, alongside some of our excellent partners. And Nicole, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Our Freedom Oklahoma team is really grateful for the ACLU of Oklahoma and for the Campaign for Southern Equality and helping us as we all navigate this law. I'm gonna start by giving us some information about Senate Bill 613, the ban on gender-affirming care related to transition for Oklahomans under 18 that was passed into law with emergency, officially effective May 1st. I'm going to do my best to give you some additional political context to sort of how we got to this political moment in Oklahoma. And I am sure that there are plenty of folks on this call who can help fill in any gaps or information that I might miss. When we started this 2023 legislative session at the beginning of February, there were 15 different bills authored targeting gender-affirming care in some way, shape, or form. Some of those targeted folks up to through age 25, some were under 21, and Senate Bill 613 ended up being under 18. It seemed very clear that they were going to try to use the bills with these larger age ranges to suggest that under 18 was a compromise or something that people should be grateful for when we know that any ban on gender-affirming care is cruel and unacceptable. as session started, we saw sort of two different paths of legislation move. So we saw two bills advance from the Senate, Senate Bill 613, and a partner bill that had some language targeting insurance coverage and funding for any provider that provided gender-affirming care to anyone of any age. In the House, we saw sort of the language from Senate Bill 613 and the language from the other Senate bill all together in House Bill 2177. So both of those moved throughout the legislative process, sort of along our normal deadline schedule. So they started in their chamber of origin, passed out of committees in that original chamber, were sent to the floor where they passed off the floor, were then switched to the opposite chamber where they passed out of committee in the opposite chamber, and then went to the opposite chamber floor. So by the time we got to that opposite chamber deadline, which I think was 2 weeks ago now, legislative timelines are always a little tough once we get into it. We had Senate Bill 613 as sort of the only eligible bill to advance. We were coming up on that deadline. At this point, it was on the House floor, and the week it was sort of up for its final chance at advancement, there were 6 different amendments filed in the House. So even as we went through this process, we saw kind of rapidly and constantly changing language that tried to appease different factions of extremists attempting to take away gender-affirming care from trans kids. And so what we ended up with was a piece of legislation that targets Two-Spirit, trans, and gender nonconforming youth in Oklahoma, so people under the age of 18. It specifically prohibits access to hormone replacement therapy and puberty blockers. It also prohibits transition-related care. It does have exclusions for mental health care, so your mental health treatment should not be impacted in any way, shape, or form by this piece of legislation. Though we also know that a lot of doctors are trying to figure this out in real time too. So as you encounter people who are trying to figure out what this means for their practice, feel free to send them our way. But ultimately, we ended up with this ban, and one of the main things that happened when it was amended in the House is an emergency was added. So when it was introduced in the Senate author originally suggested that they understood that when they passed SB613 last fall during special session and closed the Roy G. Biv Clinic at OU Health as a condition of ARPA funding, that it was a mistake, though I don't think they ever would admit to a mistake out loud, to cut people's access to care off immediately, that there needed to be space for people to figure out continuation of care plans, that people needed to have consideration about what it would mean to lose access to treatments that they'd been on. And so the bill as originally written would have gone into effect when most pieces of legislation do, which is November 1st of 2023. And so that is how it moved through the Senate and out of committee in the House. On the House floor, the amendment that they picked up of the 6 that were introduced changed a few of the definitions. The main thing it did was it added an emergency. And so an emergency clause requires 2/3 of the members of the legislature to say that this impacts Oklahomans in such a way that this law needs to be effective much sooner, and they can attach a date to that. So the emergency as written in Senate Bill 613 finally was one that made it effective as soon as it was signed by the governor. What they suggested as an alternative to the original delay of care is that there's a 6-month tapering off period written into the bill, in which folks who would be impacted by this law currently receiving care should continue to receive care in a way that tapers off towards this deadline. I'm going to let Megan dig into some of that more. I think that it's important to note that while these bills are copied and pasted from state to state, that we are also seeing a lot of real-time changes as legislators think that they have some novel idea or sloppily written language to accommodate someone else in their party. And so I think that some of the language we see around tapering off especially falls into that category where there aren't a lot of clear definitions or guidance for doctors who are trying to figure out what liability they are and aren't taking on. A few additional pieces of note, I think, for this particular piece of legislation, based on some of the other iterations we saw, is Senate Bill 613 doesn't have prohibitions around insurance coverage. We saw that written in a few bills, and this version does not have that language in it. This also does not have language around funding. We saw a few iterations that would have targeted any state appropriated funding, and that is not in this version. This does apply to people under the age of 18. So again, we saw a few different age ranges, and this ultimately lands under 18. It does not prohibit access to mental health care. And that was made very clear on the legislative record. And we'll happily help providers understand that in any way we can. It also doesn't have penalty language around leaving the state. Some of the aiding and abetting language that we've seen in other states is not in this iteration of the bill. The enforcement mechanisms, I think, just of note, are really targeting providers especially. So there's potential license revocation. There is civil penalties up until the person being treated is 45 years old, and also criminalization through felony punishment if someone is charged for violating this law. So it is meant to scare doctors. It is meant to scare patients as well. And as we navigate all of this together, I just think it's important that I know we're all going to have a lot of questions. We're going to do our best to answer some of those today, and also to work beyond today to continue to provide answers. We're going to work to provide resources where we can. And we also, very fortunately, have partners who were ready to go as soon as this passed litigation pathway to fight in the courts for us. And I'm going to hand it over to Megan to talk a little bit about that legal fight and what's happening there.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. So as Nicole said, we knew we were likely going to be facing one of these bans and wanted to make sure that we were able to bring litigation as soon as any ban went into effect. And with 613, we were able to work together with our partners at ACLU National, Lambda Legal, and a private firm, Jenner and Block, are working pro bono. And we are representing a variety of trans kids who need access to this care, as well as providers. And we filed a challenge in federal court in the Northern District of Oklahoma, challenging both Senate Bill 613 from this session and last session, Senate Bill 3, as a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, because they both discriminate on the basis of sex and on the basis of transgender status without a reasonable justification or tie to a legitimate government purpose. And that is because in both bills, they condition the receipt of treatment on whether or not those treatments continue or disrupt gender stereotypes associated with that person's sex assigned at birth. And so that is discrimination, both on the basis of sex and trans status. And so we have filed a facial challenge to both of those laws. And in addition to filing our complaint, we also filed what's called a motion for preliminary injunction. And that is a request that the court stay enforcement while we litigate the rest of the case. And so that will be one of the first motions decided on by the court, is whether or not to stop enforcement while the rest of the litigation goes forward, because litigation is a lengthy process and the harm started immediately. And while 613 does include that tapering off provision, these are medications that are not intended to be tapered off. So even within those first 6 months, the requirement that folks change the way they were prescribed necessary medication is already a constitutionally significant harm. And we have ensured that the court understands that while it takes some time to consider motions for preliminary injunction, that this is an order that Oklahomans need in a timely manner, and are making sure the court understands that at least before the end of that 6-month period, by November 1st. And so we have filed our complaint. We filed that motion for preliminary injunction. The state has some time to respond. The defendants include the Attorney General, several state boards like the Medical Licensure Board, the Nursing Board, State Board of Osteopathic Examiners, as well as OU Health in a variety of its legal iterations. And so they have some time to respond, will respond, and then we're waiting on an order from the court. In the meantime, both Senate Bill 3 and 613 are in effect. And within this first 6 months, the language, while broad, can be sufficiently specific to help providers figure out what conduct is and is not prohibited, right? So it allows for puberty blockers and hormone treatment for the purpose of assisting a minor with gradually decreasing and discontinuing the use of those treatments. So what providers may do under that language is continue to prescribe at the same dosages with instructions to taper down. And so we are awaiting response from defendants, then we'll get an order. If folks have any questions about the litigation, I will put my email in the chat. And I look forward to discussing more about what to expect. And we're hoping that we get some swift action in this case.
Thank you so much for that, Megan. And I will just, I know we've had a few folks jump on since we started. We are working our way through kind of the presentation portion of our conversation this evening. And at the end, we've got some time reserved for Q&A. So if you've got questions, if you want to drop them in the chat so you don't forget them, you are welcome to do that. And we will do our best to get through as many as possible when we wrap up. I'm going to hand it over to the Campaign for Southern Equality team to talk a bit about their incredible work and how they're helping folks on the ground here in Oklahoma.
Hi, y'all. For those of y'all who are just joining, my name's Emma. I work with the Campaign for Southern Equality, and we are a regional organization that supports LGBTQ people in the South. Yeah, and now Oklahoma, we're really excited to be doing this work with Freedom Oklahoma.
Town hall about trans healthcare.
As I put in the chat, these slides and the recording of this meeting are going to be shared with everyone. And we also have a really awesome resource guide called the Oklahoma Resource Guide that sort of goes through a bit of the information about the law, how to prepare. I mean, it's already being implemented, unfortunately, but just how to get started preparing to continue your care, information about identifying out of state care, and also just lists of supportive groups and community organizations, which hopefully will be growing as we continue doing this work in Oklahoma and learning about new resources. So that will be sent to everyone as well. Yeah, and there you go. Cool. Oh, can you go back one? Awesome. Okay, so yes, here. Oop. Okay, having issues with slides. We're all good. Yeah, so I really am excited to share with y'all about the Southern Trans Youth Emergency Project. This is a program that Campaign for Southern Equality has been launching across the South, and now in Oklahoma. And the goal of the program is really to provide resources and guidance to families who are impacted by anti-transgender healthcare bans. Unfortunately, 75% of trans youth who live in the South are living in states with healthcare bans at this point. So the program has 3 main goals. Firstly, we want to inform and support. So we want to provide clear, accessible information and updates about the status and content of gender-affirming care bans and how to access care when these bans go into effect. So one way that we're doing that is through events like this. Secondly, we're providing patient navigation. So we are able to provide folks with referrals to gender-affirming care providers in states without bans and give people information about mental health resources and community groups in their communities. And then finally, we have emergency assistance grants. So these are direct grants of $250 to assist families of trans youth with anything that they might need, travel costs, costs of prescriptions, maybe just like a nice dinner for your family. There's really no restriction on what that grant can be used for. Yeah, and we really just want to encourage folks to reach out about these resources. They're here for you, even if you're really not sure what your plan is at this point. We are here and available to sort of talk through what some of your options might be and connect you with resources that could help you out. So how can you access these resources is probably a question that you might be asking yourself. So these are available to parents, guardians, or caregivers of trans youth. We're not able to give grants directly to people under the age of 18. But those folks can access these resources by filling out a form on our website, which we can put in the chat and also send to you in an email. And then Carolyn's gonna talk to you about what happens after you fill out that form.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Carolyn again for folks that have just joined, and I also work with CSE. When you fill out this form, it goes directly to me. I am the person that is receiving all of this information. So I just want to be very, very clear that this is a very safe method of communication, and it's going to a person, not a computer, and that person's me. And when you fill out the form, we'll ask you just which state you're filling out the form from and a little bit about your family situation. And if you're interested in that patient navigation support or that $250 grant, I'll get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a quick call or a long call if you want to talk for longer. Honestly, I know that sometimes it feels better to have space and time to talk about what you're going through. Either option totally works. We'll get on the phone and talk a little bit through your options through out-of-state care. And if you are interested in the grant, I will fill out the grant application with you on the phone. So it can be really just one phone call to get you all the information that you need, but we'll also continue the relationship and are happy to continue to exchange information via email or follow-up phone calls with you as well. So it'll be me. I'll be the one that you'll be talking to. And I hope that you'll reach out if there's anything that you need.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, and also I'm sure that there's a lot of allies on this call who are hoping to help during this really extremely tough time for trans youth and their families in Oklahoma. And yeah, we just really encourage you to spread the word about these resources. We've created an outreach toolkit So that kind of includes some draft like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter posts, and a draft email that anyone can easily copy and paste onto their own personal account, post into Facebook groups that you might be a part of, and just try and get information about these resources out to those who need them. And I'd also encourage y'all just to read through the Oklahoma Resource Guide and share that with anyone you know who might benefit from the resources that we have to offer. Yeah, and I'd love if anyone from Freedom Oklahoma has anything to add on this. Otherwise, I think that's all I have for this part.
Yeah, I think all I'll add is that like this is a living document and website that we will continue to add resources as time passes, as we gather more resources. So feel free to keep checking on that as you have resources that are helpful to folks right now. Definitely welcome you sending those our way too. I will drop my email in the chat just so you've got that. I think we are at a questions portion of the evening. We are going to stop recording.